All right. My fourth question is, I think it's a very juicy one. It's called Live Mass Suffering and Leftism Gone Wrong. This is one of the most intriguing discussions that you brought up in 10 Myths about Israel. I find it fascinating as a non-Euro-American leftist as well, that I was very happy to see this discussion in the 10 Myths. I do my own research on the need to look at nuances of applying what Marxist ideas of change in colonized contexts. So this is the idea, and I'm sorry for the long introduction, and your answer could be super short because I'm basically saying what you have said in your book. So you say, or this is no, this is what I say. Marxism itself is a critical philosophy. And you also say this in this book, that is grounded on the universal values of modern thought, right? Now, modern thought could not have been propagated this universally, or they could not have been this universally prestigious, or it could not have had as this universally prestigious interpretations of human conditions or human thought without the help of colonialism, right? So this discussion in decolonial thought, where we say modernity and coloniality, they're the same side, they're different sides of the same coin, does apply to Marxism as a progressive thought as well. Now, the myth that leftist thinking can be the panacea for all unjust human conditions shows us that universalist vestiges, it shows those universalist vestiges in this thinking. This is why I often mention and I often bring up Catherine Walsh's quote on how Marxism itself is an ethnophilosophy with its own history, race, region, etc. It needs to be taken into consideration when we're looking at Marxism. Otherwise, we will make ethical mistakes along the way, and Marxism has committed ethical mistakes along the way and has been looked at by decolonial scholars. Now, you discuss the fusion of Zionism as a colonial narrative with socialism. I was shocked to actually read this. I read it a few times. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. These are some of the intriguing points that you bring up. You say one of the most intriguing uses of the Bible in Zionism is that practiced by the socialist wing of the movement. The fusion of socialism with Zionism began in earnest after Herzl's death, as the various socialist factions became the leading parties in the world Zionist movement and on the ground in Palestine. For the socialists, one of them said, the Bible provided the myth for our right over the land. It was in the Bible that they read stories about Hebrew farmers, shepherds, kings, and wars, which they appropriated as describing the ancient golden era of their nation's birth. Returning to the land meant coming back to become farmers, shepherds, and kings. Thus, they found themselves faced with a challenging paradox, for they wanted both to secularize Jewish life and to use the Bible as a justification for colonizing Palestine. In other words, though they did not believe in God, he had nonetheless promised them Palestine. Another point you mentioned is biblical archaeologists who would enter a land and then deem it as an old Jewish place for a socialist establishment, kibbutzim, to be built there. The kibbutz, the left, the communism in its purest form on occupied land. If I'm not mistaken, this is a phrase from you. Now, you also mentioned about a special committee of biblical archaeologists who would enter a deserted village and determine what its name was in biblical times. Energetic officials of the Jewish National Fund would then establish the settlement with its newly recovered name. A similar method was used after 1967 by the then Minister of Labor, Yigal Allon, a secular socialist Jew, for building a new town near Hebron, since it belonged to the Jewish people, according to the Bible. Two more points before I ask you the question. And you also, I'm going to read two quotes from you again. For many Zionist leaders, the reference in the Bible to the land of Palestine was just a means to their ends and not the essence of Zionism. It was clear in particular in texts written by Theodor Herzl in a famous article in a Jewish Chronicle in 1896. He based the Jewish demand for Palestine on the Bible, but expressed his wish that the future Jewish state be run according to European political and moral philosophies of his time. Now, the interpretation of the Bible as the divine justification for Zionism helped the socialists to reconcile their adherence to the universal values of solidarity and equality with the colonization and the colonial project of dispossession. Indeed, since colonization was the main goal of Zionism, one had to ask what kind of socialism this was. After all, in the collective memory of many, the golden period of Zionism is associated with a collectivist, egalitarian life embedded in the establishment of the kibbutz. And it's the form of life lasted long after Israel was founded, if I'm not mistaken. This form of life lasted long after Israel was founded and attracted young people from all over the world who came to volunteer and experience communism in its purest form. Very few of them realized or could have known that most of the kibbutzim were built on destroyed Palestinian villages, whose populations had been expelled in 1948. In justification, the Zionists claimed that these villages were old Jewish places mentioned in the Bible, and hence their appropriation was not an occupation, but a liberation. A special committee of them would enter, a biblical archaeologist would then enter a deserted village and determine what it was, and that I talked about before. So how did you notice, this is my question to you, how did you notice the bizarre role of leftism in the formation of myths and in solidifying it? What were your first reactions to it? And if you want to answer also, and I'm mindful of time, this is question 4, we have 6 more to go. So where do you think leftists get it wrong?
Yeah.
How mindful should we be as leftists in order to make sure we do not take unethical stances that eventually lead to mass suffering to justifying the suffering of others?
Yeah. Well, what helped me to kind of unpack this relationship were 2 sources. First of all, I have to say there were few scholars before me, including in Israel itself, that were writing about it. And I mentioned them, the Sternhal and others. People were already aware of it when I started exploring it because of the passage of time, and they had a bit of more critical view on the past, and that I have to say I really rested on their shoulders, so to speak. But I also was a member of first a socialist party, then a communist party, and especially the Zionist Socialist Party I belonged to when I was a BA student and an undergraduate student. I could see this a kind of contradiction, if you want, on a daily basis. A party that was very loyal to socialism, in fact, in the early 1950s was even loyal to Stalinism, and yet was totally in denial of where its resources of power are coming from, which were the kibbutzim, not only in terms of land, but also in terms of what you produce out of the land. And watching it on a daily basis, I could see that there was something which is typical, I think, to that kind of group of people who are exhausted by, on the outside, to try and square the circle all the time between socialism and colonialism, or socialism and ethnic cleansing, or socialism and genocide, call it what you want. It's a very exhausting. So what they do, they allow themselves total freedom when they speak to you, because you are, I always remember that sentence when they said, when they heard my criticism, they said, but between you and I, when nobody is listening, you do think like we do, don't you? And I would say, no, I'm sorry. What I'm saying to you here is what I'm saying outside. And that is very interesting. This idea that, and that's where you become really enemy number 1, that you're exposed that kind of internal discussion, because so towards the outside you can somehow gloss over it, kind of saying, oh, look, we have some Arab members in our party. There are 2 Arab families in the kibbutz. So it's not true that our socialism is racism, right? So that's where the hypocrisy,
Mhm.
and nothing drives me mad more than hypocrisy.
Mhm.
And I think that I was living it on a daily basis was very important. Now, what went with the left? I think it's very interesting that uh, uh, especially in regarding the left in Palestine, we keep forgetting that organically it should be actually analyzed as part of the left in the Arab world, not part of the left in Europe. What Zionism does, it takes any phenomenon in Palestine, which is geographically part of the Arab world, and says it's actually a European issue. So it's European socialism and so on. No, no. If in fact, if you look at the left, towards the east and not towards the west, when you're in Palestine, then you can see it's not even a very brutal criticism as such. It's just saying, you know, this is not a universal idea. It's a Western idea, which has a lot of positive issues that we in the Arab world got very excited about because some of it really resonated with us and with the problem we are facing as a society or as an economy. However, we can see immediately the context in which it was, the time in which it was born, and where it isn't relevant to us. Our relationship with tradition, our relationship with religion, our relationship with group identities, which for us are very, very important. And nonetheless, we are willing to dialogue with values of social equality, economic equality, the lesser, even a working class success in the future. So all of that, I think, is something that the left in the Arab world is reconsidering. And I think now that multiculturalism in its true sense has changed the demographics and mosaic fabric of many countries, including in the global north, this becomes again a universal discussion of how the left deals with identities, tradition, religion, not from the lofty position of a secular global northern person, but as part of a genuine dialogue.
Thank you very much. The exclusionary practices I've noticed in the leftist circles are a dilemma for sure, and that's why, and also the fact that this contradiction, you're right, to see something that is universal but also very specific. I also noticed that there are a lot of there's a lot of backlash when you critique progressive ideas or seemingly progressive ideas, as opposed to, just criticizing backwards ideas. And leftism and Marxism definitely has that reaction, an allergic reaction to it being criticized.